It's time for NuWho Review with your host, Farrar Hutkins, and guests, Lewis Dobbin and Alex Cannon. Hi again, I'm Farrar, and I'm here with Lewis.
Hello.
And Alex.
Hi.
We're back for episode 4 of season 8. Listen. We're very glad that you're doing so. Written by Stephen Moffat, directed by Douglas McKinnon. By the way, I thought the direction was very good. I thought the cinematography in this episode was excellent. I thought it looked great.
And I have to say, you need a really good director to do one of the creepiest Doctor Who episodes, I think, ever.
Yeah. Lighting, sets, costumes all looked great this time.
Sounds. Don't forget the sounds. Good
sounds were great.
Effect work on this episode.
Not a budget episode. They didn't have a huge supporting cast, but nothing looked cheap.
But it didn't need a whole lot of production value. And it was mostly pretty simple from a production standpoint. The time ship was the biggest set that they had to make.
The locations were good, I thought. The barn and the, I guess that was a boarding school?
Yeah.
Yeah, the boys' home, they said.
Where they came across Rupert.
I do have to say this is a real return to form for Stephen Moffat. I haven't seen this level of writing out of him in quite some time, and it really made me wish that he had never brought up the silence. I mean, unless this is intended to tie in with that somehow.
Right.
Maybe because it's been more than 6 months. The rule of television, at least if you're doing American like soap opera writing, the rule of television is if it happened 6 months ago, pretend you're writing for a whole new audience.
Yeah, but I don't expect that out of Moffat. He's brought up his own Weeping Angels many times over. And, you know, when the Doctor said there's nothing left here at the end of the universe but silence, I half expected a nod at least.
Right.
But there was no acknowledgement, and I'm not sure if they're going anywhere with that or not.
I had a problem with that when he said that there was nothing there. Then what are they looking at?
Yeah, they could have fleshed that out better. I mean, all he would have had to have said was, it's the last star burning out. That's it. Right. That's all he would have had to have said.
A single line could have explained that.
Mm-hmm.
We've been to the end of the universe twice now, by the way, because they did it with Utopia. What was the cause of the death of the universe in that episode? Was it heat death?
I thought so. I thought it was just normal.
Okay.
I thought the sun had burnt out. Or there was no, because it was all dark, wasn't it?
There were no more stars.
There was no more stars.
Right, no more stars. But that was because the Doctor wasn't there to save them, right?
Right.
They had a rather romantic explanation for it at that point. This time, it was just pretty much laid out to be the scientific end to the universe.
Even though it was sort of a horror episode, I thought it was pretty good for the characters. Clara and Danny seem to be trying to make it work, whatever it happens to be right now. I think it was their first or second date.
I think it was their first date, because they mentioned they never got the drink and they went straight to dinner.
That's
they say that a couple times.
They skipped the drink.
They skipped the drink, but it's just very awkward. It's like this. It shouldn't have to be that awkward and hard, because it kept starting and restarting. I think they were both overthinking it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what messed them up. And I think once Clara realized that, because that's why she goes back the last time.
Right, not only that, getting that second chance via the TARDIS.
Yeah, and she gets, and then, at the very end of the episode, she goes and she's, and he goes, I get nervous, and she's like, I do too. And it's like, I think this is why we get nervous. And then they have the kiss. And because it was, I guess we all have that moment where we really, 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 really like somebody and we just overthink it to death. And I think that was just a prime example of this.
They were both doing it.
And they're both nerds. Like, they're both, they're both teachers. They're both, and they were trying to be witty and funny, and they just kept overthinking and kept, totally saying the wrong thing.
There was a leitmotif played in the restaurant. Was that Clara's or was that Dan's?
I was wondering, there were some people online theorizing about how that seems like it's Clara's theme now.
Clara does have a theme song. But I don't remember if that's her song or not. She does have one, though. It's the melody that plays in the episode when we meet her parents with the leaf. They play that one a lot.
Oh, wow.
They played it. They did play it a lot in the last episode, the Sherwood episode.
I love the misdirection for the audience where the doctor talks to the night watchman about if he ever has his coffee disappear.
Yes, I love
and
that.
the way that is filmed, the way he looks down and the coffee is gone and we get the reaction shot, and then the next thing you see is the doctor outside and he brings the coffee up from out of shot and drinks it. I thought
that was awesome.
That was
really
a great
good.
moment. God, there were so many great little comedic moments
Yeah.
to lighten up a really serious and dark episode.
When Clara's about to put her hands on the doctor's shoulder and she kind of hesitates just for an instant, and then at the same time, when she does that, he has this look on his face, like, and then it makes more sense at the end of the episode when she hugs him and he goes, I don't do hugs, I don't do hugs. I went back and I looked at that other scene and I thought, he's got that look on his face like, oh God, is she going to hug me? Don't hug me, no. It's like uncomfortable when she puts her hands on his shoulders. I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah.
When he's trying to work on, Clara's talking at that point, so it's kind of one of those things that's a little background. But the doctor's working on stuff. He puts the sonic screwdriver down. He picks up a real screwdriver, and he gives it this look, like...
Really? Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was that?
Yeah. He puts the sonic screwdriver down, and he picks up an old
I
metal
saw it 3 times
screwdriver.
and I missed that. Like, so he has the Sonic, so he did. It didn't blow
Yeah.
up?
That was
Yeah.
just completely, wiped out. That theory about him
maybe
leaving
she
it
did-
behind in the castle.
Maybe she did grab it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Must have. Or he just made a new one.
Yeah.
Speaking of things for the fans, when he's half conscious, when he's in the TARDIS, when the doctor is beginning to wake up or sort of semi-conscious, when he says,
Sontarans perverting the course of human history. You're confusing me. What? Shut up. Shut up.
that reminded me of the regeneration from John Pertwee to Tom Baker in Tom Baker's first episode when he is lying on the floor after his regeneration, semi-conscious, and he says,
I tell you, Brigadier, there's nothing to worry about. The Brontosaurus is large and placid.
referencing back to one of his predecessors' episodes.
Yes.
And now we've had an episode with Peter Capaldi quoting one of his previous incarnations from a previous episode. I thought that was really...
That was cool.
I thought that was really cool. Something for the fans.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean anything for someone who doesn't get the reference, but I thought that was pretty good. Slower pacing of this episode. I thought it was nice that this episode took its time to really get the suspense going instead of having your typical fast cut scenes and relying on an underscore of music.
Wow, you're right.
To build the suspense.
This kind of episode where they really want to creep you out would never work as a roller coaster ride. Much, much better this way.
Slaving the TARDIS to you. Focus on the dream. Focus on the details. Picture them. Feel them. The TARDIS will track on your subconscious and extract the relevant information. It should be able to home in on the moment in your timeline when you first had that dream. And then we'll see
What will we see?
what's under your bed.
I don't think until now that we've seen a single-minded sense of purposeness quite like he had in this episode.
Yeah.
It's been kind of building up to this. I'm not sure if all the chalkboard scribblings have been this old project that he's on with the Nightmares, but it did kind of point to that.
I thought it was interesting that he was investigating something. You know, you mentioned, I think in the very first podcast, how Capaldi grew up watching Pertwee and Baker.
Right.
And Pertwee's doctor, partly because he was confined to Earth and he was UNIT's scientific advisor, and so was Tom Baker for his first several episodes. He was a scientist, tinkering, and, you know, he had chemistry sets and he was doing electronics and
Yeah,
doing
and chalkboards. There were
various sorts of
frequently
things.
lots of
Chalkboards.
equations in the background behind him.
This is kind of cool that the doctor's being a scientist again.
Yeah.
Still an adventurer, still a
Right.
traveler, still enjoying rushing into the unknown, but also doing research. You know, he's come up with something that he wants to investigate. He has a hypothesis about the creature that's evolved so perfectly that you can't see it. And using the scientific method, he then goes and tests his hypothesis.
One tenet of this doctor's regeneration that I'm kind of picking up on is, in previous, the doctor lies was a trope, right? This trope is now the doctor is mistaken. The doctor is actually wrong. It happened in the Dalek episode, where he was wrong about converting a Dalek to being good. in Robin Hood, he was very wrong about Robin Hood's nature.
Right.
And in this episode, it appears that he may be completely wrong about his hypothesis about a creature with perfect hiding skills.
Right.
Yeah, but that
It
does...
might all be in his head.
There is... That was one of the things that I didn't necessarily have a problem with, but I did have questions about if there really wasn't anything there.
Right.
Then who whispered "listen" at the hatch, and who knocked 9 times? Because
And-
it was 9 times. I don't know if that's a significant.
Oh,
I counted
okay.
it because
Who
I was
was on
curious.
the-
I was wondering if it's going to be 4 times.
Well, and who was on the bed under the blanket?
Right.
Was it just a little kid? Did we just save a kid?
Yeah, was it an
hiding-
embarrassed little kid from the next room over?
Would have been
or-
a kid in a mask, because what I saw out
Yeah.
of focus
Yeah.
over the
I looked at
shoulder
that
was
again,
not
too.
human.
Yeah.
It was not human, right.
Yeah, it was
Right.
something.
It was really hard for me to see.
Right. And maybe that was the whole point. Or maybe it was really nothing and maybe it was our imagination making it something.
Yeah, or maybe it
Because
was
the power of imagination, because he said he had accounts of everyone having this.
Exactly.
So maybe because
Right.
of everybody had these dreams, it's really nothing and we made it into something.
There was a line in
Happy
there
thought.
when the doctor said, creatures that show themselves to the very young, the very old, and the very mad. There's one thing ticking around the back of my head
Is the doctor mad
that
now?
makes me wonder, is the doctor going mad? Is this incarnation of the doctor half cracked, starting to...
And that's why he's scribbling on chalkboards and he's wrong all the time?
Yes, he's wrong all the time. He's talking to himself a great deal when he's alone. He's coming out with these very paranoid theories. And I really wonder if that's where they're going with this.
He's paranoid about the wrong things, though.
Right.
Yeah.
He should be paranoid about Clara running every aspect of his life now. The writers seem to be using Clara to destroy any mystery about the doctor's past now. She gives him the soldier without the gun. She causes him to have the dream. She tells him that he's going to be back at the barn.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit tired of seeing Clara's hand in the doctor's upbringing.
Yeah, once again, we've got a
mean-
companion who is so special that, in this case, she's woven throughout the Doctor's timeline, and I thought that was dead and buried, but now here it is again.
As somebody who grew up watching Doctor Who, I thought having a grown person who has a distaste for violence but will use it when absolutely forced, I thought it was interesting, and we could just sort of assume that he came to that over time of his own volition, because the Doctor was very, very old.
But Linwood is dead.
Because of heart failure.
No, Professor Kettering, because of this machine.
I tell you, that man's death had nothing to do with this machine. And if you were a scientist, you'd understand.
If I were a scientist, let me tell you so that I am a scientist. And I have been for several thousand...
And then he stops himself.
The Doctor's affinity for arming himself with his wits instead of a gun, I thought was really well touched on here. And that quote,
A soldier's so brave, he doesn't need a gun. He can keep the whole world safe.
was a nice little reference to the Doctor himself.
The whole conversation about fear reminded me of Planet of Spiders.
Yes, me too.
This is the last John Pertwee story, so it's the last story of the third Doctor, and I believe it's a 6-parter. At the very end, as he lies dying, as far as we know, Sarah Jane asks him, why did you do it? Why did you go back?
I had to face my fear, Sarah. I had to face my fear. That was more important than us going on living.
And that was his reason. That was his only reason.
Yes.
This is a nice look back at the Doctor and fear. It's kind of nice to see this Doctor acknowledging and facing those less pleasant emotions that he could easily disguise.
At the same time, too, what was funny about this was that it made me think very vividly of a quote from, I believe it was Robots of Death, where Leela tells the Doctor, I can sense danger, I can smell danger.
Something's wrong.
That's true.
No, something different. Something that could destroy us all.
You're letting your imagination run away with you.
Can't you feel it?
No, I can't. By the pricking of my thumb, something wicked this way comes. No, I can't, and neither can you.
On the one hand, I liked this episode because we got a lot more of Clara in it. We got a lot more of her social life. She's really being fleshed out as a character now. It kind of, for me, ruined some of the mystery of the Doctor's past. I don't want to see everything about the Doctor explained.
Right. True.
I think that's my only problem. I'm a little bit tired of this constant digging into the Doctor's past to explain things. I don't need everything explained. And at the end of this episode, they didn't explain whether he was actually afraid of something that was there or whether the only thing he had to fear was fear itself.
Yeah.
Or he went back and changed it. Like, I mean, he could have been the one that was knocking 9 times and said, listen, and then the chalk, the writing on the chalkboard. So I thought maybe he...
Personally, I think it was Clara.
Every time.
Sure, why not? Clara's been everywhere.
Right.
She's been in all 13 of his incarnations. She's been all over universe and time. I think she was outside knocking on the ship. I think she was playing a practical joke on
Anything
themselves.
is possible, isn't it? What's funny about that is that I remember reading one of the young Peter Capaldi fan letters, and I think one of the complaints about Deadly Assassin was that we found out a little too much about the Time Lords and just how seamy their society really was.
Well, that brings up a question that I had about this episode, and that was the whole, he'll never make Time Lord.
Right.
Which, it's a rank now? I thought Time Lord was a class of Gallifreyans who were selected because of their sensitivity to time.
Back in the classic era, there were people living outside the Citadel in the ruins, in the wastelands. I took all of this to mean that the Doctor was raised by them. There's several episodes where he alludes to hanging out with them and learning from them.
The wilderness of Outer Gallifrey. Ready to go?
I suppose so.
Come on, it's not the end of the universe. We're home.
He quoted his sensei in State of Decay, who was in the hills of Outer Gallifrey.
That's right.
He used to hang out outside the Citadel, so he was not hanging out with high Time Lord society.
This could be one of those things that they're just going to rewrite as they go.
I think this is Stephen Moffat fleshing out something that was not decided on up until now. He's insinuating that a Time Lord is chosen.
Speaking of Tom Baker, I loved Capaldi's manic grin. He did it a couple of times, but the first time I noticed it was when he said, "What's under your bed?"
Yes.
Whoa! Because I don't remember him smiling at all in the last episode. He was playing the straight man the whole episode, so he couldn't really get into that emotional spectrum. And Into the Dalek, I think it was just too serious of an episode that he didn't really have any lighter moments. But this time, I saw him smile and grin a couple of times in this episode, and each time I thought, that's cool. I mean, obviously, Peter Capaldi he's got the gamut. He can do whatever is needed, including grinning like a maniac.
Yeah.
Which I thought was great. It was a very alien thing of him to do. It showed the sense of adventure and excitement that we got from David Tennant's Doctor when he was going into an unknown or possibly scary situation. He would get excited and he'd grin.
Right.
Yeah.
Matt Smith had a different kind of energy, and it's nice to see that energy is still carrying over in a different way.
Perhaps they're all just waiting. Perhaps when we're all dead, out they'll come a-slithering from underneath the bed.
What wrote "Listen" on the chalkboard in the TARDIS? That's what I'm...
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, did he go... Because there's a part, like, at the very end of the episode where he's just standing there looking at the chalkboard, and I was like... And you just see him get a look on his face, so I'm like... And then he underlines it, so I'm like, did he do that because he's realizing that he actually wrote it?
Yeah,
So I wasn't sure if it was, like, him going back in time and writing it.
He admitted that it was his handwriting.
Yeah, because she said, it looked like you... Because Clara does say that. It looks like you wrote it. And he goes, well, did I?
I'm going to stand by my theory.
I was going to say, maybe that makes sense. If he is mentally ill, he could have written that and then forgotten about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He could have written while in a different state of mind and then come back to it and gone, I don't remember writing that.
Or he could be losing moments
of
time. He could be somewhat schizo.
I mean, who called him a madman with a box? I mean, that's been a phrase that we use with Matt Smith.
Yeah,
and then
that was
also
thrown around a lot.
And then didn't River? Okay, I know y'all aren't fans of River, but didn't she say when Amy and Rory were in their last episode, Angels of Manhattan? He said, "Are you going to travel with me?" And she goes, "Only one sociopath per TARDIS." So she says something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
So there has been, we have used the term that there's something wrong with.
Yeah,
him.
there's been insinuations, but it was never explicit in his actions. And in this case, dragging Clara around to prove a very unsteady point that he's come up with just off the top of his head, something, that traces back to his childhood, and then to have that being a circular loop of time that Clara actually caused,
That leads me to another question that I have, and I've seen this episode once. You guys have seen it more times than I have. The time lock that they put on Gallifrey in the day of the doctor.
Okay, yeah.
Does that include Gallifrey prior to the Time War? Because if that barn that Clara went to...
Remember that he says, he goes, the tortoise isn't supposed to take us all the way out here because some idiot turned off the safeties. The safeties. So maybe he turned off the safeties to go, would that...
Right, but if that's all he had to do to reach Gallifrey, then that doesn't make any sense.
That's kind of what I thought it was, but I don't know.
Well, that's why I think perhaps the barn wasn't on Gallifrey.
Me too. I don't think it was either.
If it was, then it would be too easy for him to go and find it because all he has to do is turn the safeties off or go back to Gallifrey before the Time War and wait.
Right.
Put your TARDIS in a temporal state of grace, clothe it behind a perception filter, and wait.
It doesn't make sense.
You're immortal. You can wait for the Time War.
Or maybe Clara just thinks it's the Born and she just says that.
I think I like your theory, Lewis, that the Doctor is slowly losing his mind. Because
it makes sense out of a lot of this
Well,
stuff.
it explains a lot of things that I had problems with that I took notes about. Why doesn't the Doctor realize that Clara's lying to him? Mm-hmm. Why doesn't he make the connection between her and Danny Pink and Orson Pink and all the Pinks? Even though he hasn't seen what we, the audience, have seen, he should be clever enough to figure out, she was distracted by her phone ringing and we ended up here. Well, let's look at the phone and see who was calling. I love the part where no one in the restaurant noticed a man walking in wearing a full spacesuit and helmet and
I was curious about
breathing like Darth Vader. I want to go to this restaurant.
Yeah, I think they were playing up a potential shock moment that they didn't.
I thought Danny was going to turn around and see him.
I thought there was a really big flaw in casting the same guy to play Orson Pink. It seemed like the only reason they did it was to make us wonder when we saw the trailer. There was that reveal that was in the trailer.
Right.
And then in the next episode, we go,
yeah.
That's all? It was also unnecessary for the Doctor to not let him change out of his spacesuit before walking into an early 21st century restaurant.
Yeah, that seemed kind of weird.
I don't know. There were just some strange things. The Doctor saying, I don't take orders, and then immediately dematerializing the TARDIS just like she told him to. The line, I don't take orders, sounds good, but if you then do exactly what she told you to, cut the line.
Yeah.
Makes your character look inconsistent.
Well, he's always listening to her because she's always, I do kind of like that she's kind of stepped up a little bit. She seems to be hitting him more. And telling him to shut up. I do kind of like that because it
there's a lot of shut up in these episodes.
Yeah, it reminds
They're needling each other.
Yeah, and it reminds me a lot of Matt Smith and Amy's relationship because they were constantly doing that. And so I like
Tennant and Donna.
Yeah, that too,
Capaldi and Coleman have struck this great rhythm. I love it. The timing between the two of them is just fantastic.
They've really redeemed Clara.
Yeah,
because
we didn't have that with Clara and the 11th Doctor. Like, we didn't have that good, witty... I didn't like their relationship, and I love the rapport between these two.
It reminds me of Joe and Pertwee.
Oh, wow.
How he belittles her, especially her lack of knowledge about science.
Yeah, but he's very fond of her at the same time.
And he's very fond of her, and he will save her and make sure that she's okay. Pertwee didn't make fun of Joe's appearance. I think that's a different dynamic between that pairing and this pairing.
Yeah.
But I think they're trying to do that to play up the Doctor's alienness.
Yeah.
Especially the fact that everybody thinks he looks odd. He's pale, he's tall, he's thin, he's got he's got this kind of inverted pear-shaped head, and everybody thinks he looks strange. And so what does he do? He tells the prettiest humans around him that they all look strange too.
Right.
It's kind of yin and yang thing. I think that's kind of cute. I just hope that he doesn't insult her too much and end up getting slapped over and over and over and over.
Well, or maybe it'll come to that kind of moment, but I'll tell you one thing. The relationship between Joe and the third Doctor really softened a lot toward the end until she got paired off. And I expect this one to go pretty much along the same lines.
She's going to end up pairing off?
Yeah, I would think so.
I expect Clara also to get better about keeping her mouth shut about the past and the future.
Wow, yeah.
She is very, very clever, but as you said, when she gets in a situation where she's really nervous,
My mouth has a mind of its own.
Yeah, well, that's definitely right. After all, you called him Rupert.
Yeah. And she's like, it did? And yeah.
And then they both run out of the restaurant without paying. So
don't they?
If they ever go back to that restaurant, they're in trouble.
Maybe she goes back. She has a time machine.
That's true. Oh, that would be hilarious. Years from now, well, like episodes from now, she tells the Doctor, oh, I've got to go back to that restaurant. We never paid for our drinks.
It's a pity they're not doing interstitials anymore.
What other things are going to be explained away by Clara's omnipresence?
Anything Moffat wants.
I think that was Clara's hand under Sutek's throne. I think Clara unlocked the door in Image of the Fendal.
Oh.
Maybe Clara was the one who stitched the question marks onto the doctor's collars and left them in his wardrobe for him to find.
What if she's really the woman in the shop?
Yeah.
Clara ends up being her own.
Somebody mentioned that in the very first episode of this season, and I forgot that.
I never even thought about it till now, but if
I'm glad you brought that up.
Look, as long as she's not the doctor's mother or something completely bonkers like that, I'll be okay.
I should go back and visit Susan. No, Clara. She got into his mind and stopped him.
Speaking of Susan, I really like the doctor quoting himself. That was neat. He quoted something that he said in the first episode of Doctor Who. Fear makes companions of us all.
You're trying to help me.
Fear makes companions of all of us. That's right.
I never once thought you were afraid.
Fear is with all of us and always will be. Just like that other sensation that lives with it.
What's that?
Well, your companion referred to it. Hope. Hope, Miss Wright.
If Who is about nothing else, it's about facing your fear. It's horror for kids, and it's an object lesson in what to do about dealing with it. This episode had that in spades. This is a great rumination on fear. One of the best.
Here's the thing about this episode. There was so much to it. There's a lot of good. There were a lot of things that I found fault with. I seem to be in the minority on that. And maybe it's because I've only seen it once and there are a lot of things that I have not had answered. I also like the fact that it does raise a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Intentionally, I think. This is Stephen Moffat here. He's planting little seeds that he can go and grab for later stories.
Yeah, and tying into some of his older ones, too.
Yeah. There was so much to this episode. I think I'm going to have to give it, even though there were a lot of things I didn't like about it, there was so much that I did like about it. I'm going to give this episode about 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I would give it higher than that. I would give it 8.5 or 9 out of 10. I've got to hand it to Moffat for being so brash. You know, some of the brashest episodes were the ones that moved the show forward, like Deadly Assassin or The Time Warrior. I think overall, like I said, a rumination on fear itself, this episode points up a lot of what's good about the show, what Doctor Who's really about. A man so brave that he can save the entire world without a gun.
I have to say I would probably give it a 9 as well. I mean, it made me cry at the end, like when Clara was talking and she's talking to him, and I just had tears in my eyes. So I was like, okay. So I immediately wanted to rewatch it right after that. Right after I saw that scene, it's like, okay, we're going to be rewatching this one.
What if that was not the Doctor and it was actually the Master she was talking to?
Oh, that would be awesome.
We'll see, won't we? But first, looks like we've got another lighthearted caper.
Yeah, and I think somebody quoted Capaldi in an interview as saying that his Doctor doesn't really settle in until about the 5th or 6th episode.
Okay.
So we can get a little more of the lighthearted, and we can probably get a little bit into the deeper, scarier stuff too.
Yeah, well, we'll also see if the madness continues. I'm really keen to see if that keeps up, or if it gets to the point of being overbearing.
One thing I will say, if somebody wants an introduction into new Doctor Who, I would probably show them Robin of Sherwood and Listen.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely.
All right, guys. See you next week. Thanks
Excellent.
again.
I'll see you soon.
Great.
NuWho Review was produced and hosted by Farrar Hutkins. The guests were Louis Dobbin and Alex Cannon. The opening theme music was performed by Louis Dobbin, and music performed by the Consortium of Genius. Email your questions or comments to whovoreview@gmail.com.
Gee, maybe they'll have a sequel to this episode called Smell.